I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Sean Brodrick. He's the senior analyst for EdelSonInstitute.com. Welcome back to the show, Sean.
Thanks very much for having me on.
Pot investors in Canada, kind of a rocky ride, something going on with the Toronto Stock Exchange. Can you maybe explain?
Sure. Well, here's what happened there is that the TMX Group, which operates the Toronto Stock Exchange and the TSX Venture, announced after the close yesterday that they will look askance at any Canadian company that invests in the U.S. in violation of federal law. Federal law, not state law. And so there will be a review at the end of this year, and if companies are found in violation, they could be delisted. Now, there's only one exchange in Canada. There is the CSE. They could list there, but of course, this actually sent a shiver throughout the entire industry. There are some marijuana stocks that are up today, but most of them are down. And maybe it's just going to shake some of the air out of that sector anyway. But I had my subscribers grab some gains on a stock that could be in for some trouble. It's called Afria, because it owns a Florida company. And so, you know, there is some potential there. I think that, you know, why stand in front of that steamroller? And there are just so many good Canadian marijuana stocks to invest in. You don't have to own the ones that might be in trouble.
Regulations, of course, we still don't know exactly what they're going to be when it rolls out July 1st. Legal pot in Canada on July 1st. The Association of Chiefs of Police say that should be delayed because their officers don't know how to deal with marijuana. What? They haven't been cracking heads over pot for the last 60 years for nothing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it could, I'm pretty sure they could figure it out. That's the thing about most government involvement in these kinds of things is, you know, on the one hand, they want to help business. On the other hand, there's always some blue noses that just react badly to it in, like, any kind of way. I mean, right now we had Trudeau propose a tax on cannabis that's actually lower than most people expected, so that's actually quite bullish for the industry. But then you have this other thing with the police, or any one of the half dozen things that have come up in the last couple of months where people are obviously digging in their heels trying to slow down the rollout of legalized recreational marijuana up in Canada. And you can see how that scares the markets because they're not sure. They think, well, someday, you know, those guys will be back in power. Then what will we do? But I think once they see what happens when it is legal, for example, Colorado, the U.S. state, passed $1 billion in sales for the year just recently. And that's just one state. And that just shows you the kind of potential because once you tax that, of course, that's a lot of money that you won't have to get through other taxes, and so pretty much everyone's happy that way.
Now, the chiefs of police should be the first ones to realize that once the sales are in the hands of the government and maybe through that free enterprise, you're taking billions of dollars out of the hands of organized crime. None of them have promoted that aspect of it.
Well, some have, and certainly
not in Canada.
Oh, well, not in Canada. Well, certainly the Mexican cartels hate the idea. They really do, because they are losing money in Colorado, in Nevada. They are losing money in these places where it is legalized. So that's a very good thing. And of course, there's always the balancing act. You want to bring in enough tax money, but you don't want to put the taxes so high that the bad guys have a gray area where, like, they can operate. So it's a balancing act all around. We'll just have to see how it works out. I'm still very positive on those stocks in Canada that are sticking to Canada, and any pullback I see is a real a buying opportunity. In fact, I'm looking at some stocks right now. I added one today, but if this turns into a longer pullback, you know that I'm going to be buying more.
We'll have more with Sean Brodrick right after the break.
Lotus Ventures Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test the numerous targets located by recent groundwork will commence later this year. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Sean Brodrick. Sean, the U.S. dollar seems to be picking up steam when a lot of people predicted it would be falling flat on its face right now.
Right. Well, actually, the U.S. dollar had a nice rally earlier this year, up through just earlier this month, like a little over a week ago. Then it started to fall off again. And what happens, and I've posted this chart a lot, is the U.S. dollar-yen cross-trade that really seems to be controlling not only what goes on with the U.S. dollar, but also with gold. Because, in fact, I can post this to, like, Twitter today. You can take another look at it. I mean, depending on how that relationship works between the U.S. dollar and the yen, you can very easily predict what's going to go on with gold. And for a while, the U.S. dollar yen was actually rallying. That was weighing on gold. And then the U.S. dollar yen was going down, and that's when we saw the recent gold rally. And now the U.S. dollar yen is heading higher again. And there's a bunch of things that are actually moving here. One is that expectations of when the Fed will actually hike rates is actually increasing, or I should say the odds of the Fed hiking rates. Earlier this week, like on Monday, the odds of a Fed rate hike in December was around 86%. Right now it's at 91.7%. That's because economic news has come out that makes people think that the economy is heating up, and therefore it makes the a rate hike by the Fed more likely. And then, you know, if that happens, then there's potentially a March rate hike on the table. We'll just have to see. But one more thing is that U.S. President Donald Trump met with economist John Taylor. He's the guy that the Taylor Rule is named after, and he's associated with hawkishness on interest rates. So right now they are thinking that that he could be the next head of the U.S. Fed, and so that would be a hawkish development. And so that is really the main driver for what's putting a lift in the U.S. dollar today. But really, I suggest people go back and read John Taylor's work, because he's perceived as a hawk, but that's only a situational thing. If you look at his work compared to where things are now, what he talks about would be consistent with a rate hike in December, but not much more beyond that unless other things change. So I don't think he's nearly as hawkish as many people think he will be. It's really situational. And so I think that's kind of the market being overdramatic on this one.
If he does get named, Janet Yellen, of course, is famous now for saying we can't expect or shouldn't expect a financial crisis in our lifetime. She's 71. Does that mean that, and the average life expectancy, I think, in the U.S. is about 76. So are we good for another 5 years? Well,
I hope she lives to 115. But I don't know. I mean, you know, that's the thing with economists trying to predict the future. They're so terrible at it. They really, really are. And the reason they actually try and predict the future is because people keep asking them. So I don't blame economists completely on this. It's like people say, you know, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And it's like trying to drive down the highway while just looking in the rearview mirror. I mean, you really can run into some trouble with that kind of thing. And so, however, I would say that, Taylor, I mean, he might not be as accommodating as, she was or is in a crisis. And so that's the risk that the market's actually going to price in. Maybe they do know his work. They say, well, he's not going to raise a lot, but maybe if there's a crisis, he won't be as accommodating as she was. So we'll have to see. We'll even have to see who Trump picks to run the Fed. The guy changes his mind a lot. And so people shouldn't think, well, he had a good meeting with that guy, so that's what's going to happen. No, we don't know until it's actually announced. So I don't think people should get too really ahead of the game. Other things to actually keep in mind is what's going on in China. They're having their big 5-year meeting right now. We've seen a lot of action in the metals ahead of that and around that. So things from there seem pretty bullish for the global metals demand, simply because China's been shutting down a lot of its own production because it's so polluting. So they have to get metal from somewhere else. And so that's why you saw, for example, the price of palladium crack $1,000 an ounce on Monday. Now, it didn't stay there, but the forecast is that there's going to be a supply-demand squeeze in palladium at least through next year and maybe into 2019. So that's actually quite bullish for that metal under any kind of circumstances. What's driving that? Global auto sales. I mean, when you look at auto sales around the world, they were up more than 4% in August, which is quite a lot. And in China, they were up 8% year over year. And so, I mean, we like to talk about energy metals and electric cars, but that's actually a very tiny slice of the market. Most cars run on gasoline. A lot ran on diesel until we found out that all the makers of the diesel cars, not just Volkswagen, they were all cheating on the emissions tests. So that's kind of falling by the wayside, and that's why the price of platinum is cratering, because that isn't going to be used as much going forward. But definitely they'll be making lots of cars that run on gasoline engines, and that means the price of platinum, it could pull back a while more here, but it's probably going to remain very strong.
Well, that's because palladium's used instead of platinum for
I'm sorry, I said
converters.
Platinum twice.
Yeah.
Yes, palladium is what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, platinum was used for that for the longest time, and then they found a way to use palladium, which was cheaper. But is palladium now cheaper than platinum, or is it the other way around?
Well, right now, yes. Right now, platinum is cheaper than palladium, and there is some talk that they could switch back in the industry. But that kind of switch isn't done quickly, So over time, I would expect some kind of substitution there. But it's not something you'll see in the next few months. It really takes some time to make that kind of switch. So that's why I think a thing like palladium, could do quite well for a while.
And I know for a while here, a few years ago, the catalytic converters in big trucks, especially the Dodges, they were getting stolen overnight all the time because there was so much precious metal in the muffler that there was a black market trade in it.
Yeah, that actually still exists. It's just not nearly as much of a headline grabber as it used to be. And the metal is cheaper than it used to be. You can't get, you can't get the street price that you used to get. But, it's still out there. There's a lot of things going on in the metals markets. I mean, look at copper. That thing, broke out on Monday. It looks really, really good. That's another supply-demand situation where there are things on the supply side that looks like it could take away supply, at least over the next 6 months, maybe longer. And on the demand side, again, we have China cranking up into higher gear. They're going to need more copper. So, that's a metal that looks quite bullish.
We'll have more with Sean Brodrick right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN AF. surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines. Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com. Welcome back. We're chatting with Sean Brodrick. Sean, the NAFTA talks are going into what they feel might be their final stage. They say they want it wrapped up before the end of the year. I don't know if that's possible, considering how acrimonious those talks are. And throw into the mix the 300% tariff on Bombardier Series C's aircraft sold to the States. Delta says it's not going to pay that. And what's more, how can they claim it's a government-subsidized company now that Airbus owns 51% of the Series C aircraft and plan to build a plant in Alabama? Wouldn't the U.S. just be shooting itself in the foot to put tariffs on a plane like that?
Well, it wouldn't be the first time the U.S. shot itself in the foot. And I think we'll see more government disputes over this NAFTA thing because, it's not working out smoothly. We already saw 31.7% of tariffs put on lumber from Canada so far this year, and they've actually pushed off a final ruling on that until I think it's November, I want to say 10th or 15th, something like that. So that's a problem. And then there's a dairy industry. Right now the U.S. says that's really supported by the government. We have to stop that. And because that's, really hurting the U.S. dairy industry. The U.S. dairy industry says it's not really Canada. We just have too much milk, And so we could see a lot of upsets like this. I don't think that the NAFTA thing is really settled at all. And so that can have big trade implications for all sorts of things. Look at auto parts, for God's sakes. They're made on both sides of the border, and if they start slapping tariffs on that, either way, that's just going to drive up the price of your car.
It'll be cheaper.
There's a lot that can really go wrong there.
Right. It'll be cheaper to buy European or Asian cars.
Let's hope it doesn't come to that, but I don't put anything past the government, so maybe.
Also, with NAFTA, Canada's insisting that there be a dispute mechanism because it just points to this Boeing thing where the U.S. Department of Commerce just took whatever Boeing said, even though they're not even a competitor with Bombardier. Their airplanes are much smaller than anything Boeing makes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's all kinds of ways this can really go screwy. And I think people have actually gotten used to living with NAFTA because as a consumer, it makes your life easier. As a producer, not so much in like many instances. But once you get used to a system, and then that system gets wrench thrown in it, that's really going to upset you. We could see some more fallout from this thing going forward.
I know Trump points out Canada sells more goods to the U.S. than the U.S. sells to Canada. But when it comes to services, all of our hotel chains, fast food chains are owned by Americans. When it comes to services, the advantage goes to the Americans by about 90%. So if you put in goods and services, NAFTA's hurting Canada.
Well, but really we should be good neighbors, just like we should be good neighbors with Mexico. I hate the talk of higher tariffs or that stupid wall down there and stuff like that, which isn't going to stop anybody. And I hate to see that. I much prefer the more open border, the more open economies, and because that really helps jobs on all sides of the borders, to get these more and larger markets. And yes, some jobs go away. There is that. But sometimes the jobs do move. There is a case for that as well. But it, really once they start to stir up, this anthill, it's really impossible to tell who's going to get stung. And so, I hope they, calm down and just take a deep breath and actually think about this again.
Some of the people I've chatted with, instead of the U.S. putting up walls to both people and trade, instead we should be seeing not just a North America free trade pact, it should be the Americas, South and North America working together. Because you have to counter, India and China, they're a trading bloc. You have the European Union, they're a trading bloc. Really, if you want to compete in this world, wouldn't it be better to have, the population size of somebody like Brazil as part of your bloc?
Well, they had talked about that Pan-Pacific Partnership thing. You'll remember that. And, but unfortunately, they really let some rascals write the rules for that. And so what was coming out was not going to make anyone happy. So, I mean, we can talk about more agreements, but they have to be written in the best interest of the people of those countries. The Pan-Pacific Partnership was not. So, I mean, yay to more agreements. But if it's not written in the best interest of the voters, they are going to vote out anyone who tries to do that kind of thing. Well,
the Trans-Pacific Partnership would allow a company to sue a government if that government passed a law that hurt a company.
Well, exactly. That
means all of your environmental laws would be tossed out the window in a minute.
There were many, many things wrong. That's just one of them. So, yeah, I mean, they really let some rascals write those rules. And so, I mean, I think that would be good. In this complicated world, it's hard, really, to actually do those kinds of things because there are so many interested parties. This is why, for one reason, this is why software is such a booming industry. Because, you don't have to ship things across a border. It's a bunch of electrons. And so it's just much, much easier to actually deal with that kind of thing. You can make much more money more quickly. And that's why software companies are doing so well. I mean, one of the reasons why, yeah.
Sean, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks. It's always a good time.
My guest has been Sean Brodrick. He's the senior analyst for EdelSonInstitute.com and also Weiss Research. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. If you have any questions for us or our guests, you can send them to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.